Section 1. A sword in the garden. Imagine the tense, moonlit scene in the Garden of Gethsemane. A disciple draws a sword in panic to defend Jesus. It is a pivot point in the narrative and in a long-standing language debate. Jesus speaks a sharp rebuke in that charged moment. How that phrase is recorded gives a clue to the original language. For some, the most authentic version of this story is found not in Greek, but in the Peshitta. The Peshitta is an ancient Bible written in Syriac, close to the Aramaic Jesus spoke. This idea is called Peshitta Primacy. The claim is powerful and deeply appealing. It promises we can peel back translations and hear Jesus in a Semitic tongue. In that view, the Greek New Testament is a later, secondary translation. But evidence from linguistics, manuscript history, and textual analysis tells a different story. The Peshitta is ancient and valuable, but likely a translation from Greek. The counterclaim: the New Testament was originally composed in Koine Greek. Stories began in an Aramaic context, but were first written and circulated widely in Greek. This journey returns us to Christianity's beginnings. An ancient olive tree in Gethsemane, gnarled old, witnessing history. Section 2. Reading the tea leaves of language. Eastern Syriac versus Galilean Aramaic. The first major clue against Peshitta primacy lies in the specific dialect of Aramaic itself. Languages are not monolithic. They have regional variations, much like the difference between British and American English. The Peshitta is written in Classical Syriac, a form of Eastern Aramaic that flourished in the city of Edessa, in what is now modern-day Turkey. This region is geographically and culturally distant from the first-century Judea and Galilee, where Jesus and his disciples lived and taught. The language they spoke was a distinct dialect known as Palestinian or Western Aramaic. These two dialects, while related, are far from identical. The differences are not trivial: grammar, vocabulary, and phonetic structure. For instance, Western Aramaic, the dialect of Jesus, used different verbal forms and pronouns than the Eastern Syriac of the Peshitta. The Peshitta's language consistently reflects its Edessan origins, not a Galilean one. A book originally written in the Aramaic of first-century Palestine would look and sound quite different. It would not have the characteristic linguistic markers of a dialect from a different region and a later century. Furthermore, the Peshitta itself shows signs of being influenced by Greek, which is the opposite of what we would expect if it were the original. The Greek fingerprints all over the Peshitta's language point to its status as a translation. Section 3. Parchment and papyrus. What the oldest copies tell us. When we turn from language to physical evidence, the case for Greek priority becomes even stronger. The age and distribution of ancient manuscripts provide a clear timeline for the New Testament's transmission. Archaeology has unearthed fragments of the Greek New Testament that date astonishingly early. The most famous of these is the John Rylands Papyrus, p. 52, a small piece of the Gospel of John, dated to the first half of the 2nd century, possibly as early as 125 AD. Other fragments, like those of Mark's Gospel found in a mummy mask, have been dated by some scholars into the 1st century itself. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries, the number of Greek manuscripts explodes. We have copies and fragments from all over the Roman Empire, Egypt, Italy. This pattern of evidence, very early fragments followed by a wide distribution of copies, is exactly what we would expect from a text that was originally written in Greek and spread rapidly throughout the early church. The diversity among these early Greek copies also shows a text that was being transmitted live, with minor variations cropping up as it was copied by hand in different communities. This points to a dynamic, organic transmission process, starting from a Greek original. In stark contrast, the manuscript evidence for the Peshitta appears much later on the historical timeline. The earliest substantial manuscripts of the Peshitta New Testament date to the 4th or 5th century. The John Rylands Papyrus, a small, weathered fragment of papyrus with Greek letters held delicately. History provides the context for both language and manuscripts, and the historical context of the 1st century overwhelmingly favors a Greek original for the New Testament. While Jesus ministered in an Aramaic-speaking region, the mission of the early church was explicitly global. Jesus commanded his followers to be witnesses to the ends of the earth. In the first-century Mediterranean world, the single most effective language for reaching a diverse, international audience was Koine Greek, not Aramaic. It was the lingua franca of the Roman Empire, language of trade, language of government, language of culture, spanning from Rome to Alexandria. The Apostle Paul is a perfect example. His missionary journeys took him to major urban centers, Corinth, Ephesus, Thessalonica, each a hub of Greek language and culture. He wrote his letters to churches, all of whom communicated in Greek. To reach the widest audience with his arguments and advice, writing in Greek was a necessity. New Testament authors quote the Old Testament using Septuagint wording. Let us return to the dramatic scene in the Garden of Gethsemane, where a single verse serves as a powerful test case. In Matthew 26:52, Jesus responds to his disciple who has just used a sword. The Greek text is concise and powerful. Pantes gar hoi labontes machairon on macher apoluntai. A straightforward translation is, "For all who take the sword will perish by the sword." The phrasing is sharp, proverbial, and memorable. The repetition of the word sword, machaira, creates a strong rhetorical balance. This is effective and powerful writing in Greek, standing on its own as a complete thought. When we examine the Peshitta's rendering of this verse, we see a subtle but significant difference. The Syriac text often smooths out the phrase, sometimes using plurals or slightly different constructions that soften the direct, punchy parallelism of the Greek. The Peshitta reads like a good, thoughtful translation aiming for clarity, but it loses some of the stark, poetic force of the Greek original. This is a common feature of translation. Minor shifts make the text sound more natural in the new language. The Peshitta's version here feels like a careful rendering of a pre-existing Greek phrase. The most fascinating layer, however, lies beneath the Greek. Scholars have pointed out that an older Aramaic wordplay may be the ultimate source of this saying. In Western Aramaic, the dialect Jesus spoke, the word for sword, harba, is phonetically similar to the word for ruin or end, horba. He who lives by the harba, sword, will in the horba, end, perish. The Greek author captured its meaning with a different but equally powerful device, the balanced repetition of sword. This example perfectly illustrates the relationship between the languages. The claim of Peshitta primacy, born from a sincere desire to connect with the historical roots of Christianity, ultimately fails when tested against the evidence. The linguistic data shows that the Peshitta is written in an Eastern Syriac dialect from a later period, not the Western Aramaic of Jesus and his disciples. The manuscript evidence presents a clear timeline, Greek copies appearing centuries before the Peshitta, spreading with a pattern that indicates an original source. The historical context of the first-century Roman Empire made Koine Greek the only logical choice for a faith with a global mission. Textual fingerprints within the New Testament itself, use of the Greek Septuagint, wordplays that only work in Greek, confirm this conclusion. The test case of the sword in Gethsemane shows the Greek text as a literary bridge between an original Aramaic saying and a later Syriac translation. It is a precious daughter translation, not the mother text. Which voice speaks more clearly to you? The original composition or its ancient faithful echo? This conclusion does not diminish the importance of the Peshitta or the rich heritage of Syriac Christianity. For millions over nearly 2 millennia, the Peshitta has been and continues to be their holy scripture. It is a powerful, beautiful translation that has nourished faith. It preserves a vital Semitic perspective and offers unique insights into how the gospel was understood close to its origins. Ultimately, the evidence compels us to see the New Testament as born in a Semitic world but written for the whole world in the common language of its day. The Greek text carries unmistakable echoes of Aramaic speech, the voice of Jesus and his first followers. The Peshitta, in turn, translates that message into a sister Semitic language, creating a powerful echo of its own. The story is not one language defeating another, but how a world-changing message crossed linguistic frontiers. For the full article, Visit GalileanAramaic.com. What is your take? Does this Sa-IP shift your view? Dive into the originals and hear the pun that pierces the soul.